Thank you, Chuck, for the invitation. And Chuck has been very good to our family in the past year. Sadly, Pat's mom passed away in January after a difficult passage. She was 89, had a wonderful life. As we all know, losing family members and especially aging parents, it's a difficult time. I did what I could, but Chuck stepped up and helped oversee the sale of Pat's mom's house. It took us all the way through that, and that was a great comfort to us because that is not our world, and we know much about it. So, thank you, Chuck. Hardy was probably one of the first people I met when I moved to Windsor. We met through the Essex and Kent Scottish Regiment, and he was here to greet us when we came in this morning. And thank you very much for an exceptionally warm welcome from all the Rotarians here. Carlo and I have talked about cars before.
And aging parents, too.
Aging parents. I don't want to talk, I know that I've been asked to say a few words here. I don't want to talk too much about me. I have to say, with all humility, I've received more than my fair share of adulation, and I hope it's just about done now. I received the Third Great Harmony Award, which perhaps was the most meaningful. The Jewish National Fund recognized me with a Negev Dinner Award. I don't go looking for these things. Somehow they find me, and I'm initially inclined to decline them. But as Pat has pointed out, she said, think about the visibility you might give to the Multicultural Council. If nothing else, it perhaps may bring a few people to dinner, put a bit more coin in the coffers and things like that. So I tend to look at it that way. But my heart is really full, and I'm very happy to be in retirement. When I first got into broadcasting in 1974, I hadn't given much thought to the people I would meet in the course of doing my job. And unlike a lot of the people who are in the business today, I never set out to be a radio or TV announcer. It just happened that way. I was in university. My parents, I was the first and the only person in my family to attend university. But my dad was a metallurgist. He was born in Glasgow, Scotland. He would have had the equivalent of a PN chitty today. But he was proud that I was able to go to university. He thought it was a good place for me to be. And that was where I got introduced to the campus radio station purely as a hobby, because I'm no good at sports at all. I don't really follow sports, and I'm even worse at playing sports, though I do have an affinity for baseball. I like to hear the game. I like to see the game, but we haven't been to a Tigers game in a couple of years. But it was in the campus radio station that I got involved with radio, and I quickly realized, that everybody wanted to be a DJ back in those days, and I still love music. As Chuck mentioned, I love the Beatles. I love Led Zeppelin and Hendrix and Cream and Eric Clapton, things like that. But I quickly realized I didn't want to play music. I think I did 2 music shifts on a Thursday afternoon. Yeah, it was like a big hook came through the door. I walked into the residence and somebody said, "What show do you want?" I said, "What show do I want? I don't even know what you're talking about." He said, "We got an opening on Thursdays from 2 to 4. Well, I sat down in the chair and played, and of course, it was a turntable with records. We were broadcasting at the cafeteria. It wasn't broadcasting, actually. It was cable casting or something like that, because we were not on the air. We broadcast to the residents in the cafeteria. Maybe we reached 600 people. But that was enough to give me a taste of it, and I quickly realized that there must be something else I could do. So I started scalping the St. Catharines Standard newspaper, and I would rewrite it, and I did a news digest. And this was kind of a seminal appearance by me, because that led to my broadcast career. The long and the short of it, I was perhaps the first and only person to read a newscast on this station. And it was rough, but I got the sense. I was a good typist. I remember I'd taken auto shop and machine shop and things like that in high school, but by grade 13, they said, "You can't take shop anymore, you're an art student. But you have to take something." So my dad said, "Take typing." I'll be candid, at that time I thought typing was not a very manly thing to do. My father said, "Take it. Mrs. Yedlinski, who used to be our office manager, is now teaching the typing course at the high school. She'll set you right." That was the best thing I ever learned to do. And again, that was something that, God knows, I learned how to type, and that became so important to my career. Without the ability to type, and unlike, you even remember Walter Cronkite, if you ever see old things, they would hunt and peck. Most of these old guys typed with 2 fingers, but I was a touch typist. I typed with 10. And curiously, I learned all my keys, but we ran out of time at the end of the year. I didn't learn the numbers, and to this day, I can't type numbers. I have to look at the numbers. That was where the lesson ended. As Chuck mentioned, I've been all over the map. I've been to the Maritimes and back. Most of the time, I wasn't looking to make a move. I started at the local radio station in Welland. which is the partner community of Port Colborne, where I was raised, on the Welland Canal on North Shore Lake Erie, but at the other end of the lake. And that's why Windsor, among other things, was a good fit for me. Both are on Highway 3. If you take Highway 3 from Windsor, you can drive all the way to Fort Erie. You can go through Dunnville, Port Colborne, where I was born, and all the way to Fort Erie. It's sad about the breach at Wheatley now, because I kind of look at Route 3 as our own Route 66. Now you have to detour around that breach where the lake came in. The Mayor Caniff told me that it's doubtful that they'd ever build a bridge or anything there. At least I asked him about this. We were at the Ferguson-Jenkins, Pat and I were invited to the Ferguson-Jenkins weekend. And I said, Mr. Mayor, when are you going to do something about that breach at Wheatley? And he said, repairing that would use up the municipality's entire road budget for a year. So we've got to come up with another solution. But perhaps you don't like to define your career in terms of disasters, but I reported on the crash of Swiss Air Flight 111 off Peggy's Cove, Nova Scotia, and that's probably what got me the attention that led to the TV job. Isn't it ironic that often somebody else's misfortune is your good fortune? I certainly didn't set out for that to be the case. But I was doing quite a bit of national reporting on the radio, and that caught the attention of George Clark, who was the news director at CFPL TV in London, and he was responsible for Windsor in those days too. When he was looking for an anchor for the TV broadcast, he thought of me because he had heard me on the radio reporting on this terrible tragedy. My return to Ontario after 25 years, Kitchener out to the Maritimes and back, that was the making of me. As Chuck mentioned, the 21 years I spent as the anchor here was my defining role and by far my most satisfying assignment. Believe it or not, when I took the job in May of 2000, they were having a hard time filling the position. I think it had been open for about 6 months. There were several candidates, but none was found to be suitable. This is shocking but true. There was a lot of people in the London newsroom that was hubbed with Windsor. They weren't interested in leaving London to come down to Windsor, even to be the anchor of the broadcast. Oh, I remember even saying to I started in London with the company, as some of you may remember. Initially, the broadcast was not done from here. All the reporters, Michelle Malewski, John Lewis, they were here, but the news was anchored out of London for the first 3 years. So my first 3 years doing this, it was in London, until we got a new boss, and he saw automatically the benefit of me being here. Commercially and otherwise, that's when the sales started to grow. People said, hey, that's our local news team. It helped the station, and it was certainly good for me. But I was very grateful for that, too. Again, that was providence, if you will. Because I was untested in television. I was just purely a radio guy. Normally, they wouldn't look twice at you and say, well, you're good on the radio, but you can't do television. We'll find somebody who's done that before. But they were just glad that I had news experience, that I was able to put a newscast together. I had pretty sound judgment, I guess. And that's what led to me getting the TV job. But I certainly had my share of deer-in-the-headlight moments. And, when you look back, my very first radio broadcast was in Welland. I read the Midnight News at CHOW, and my dad recorded it on a cassette machine, played it for me when I got home. I'd be mortified to hear that now. I'd probably shrink and die, And I spoke clearly, but I was reading like 100 miles an hour. I was just eager for it to be over so I could get off the air and go home. I was a very unlikely candidate for broadcasting. But by second year university, I realized I did not want to be a teacher. I was not going to be a lawyer like my mother wanted me to be. I was not going to be a doctor like my father wanted me to be. Though my father was a metallurgist and my mother was a homemaker. But they never put any particular pressure on me, though I do remember my dad saying when he heard, he was very, not dismissive, but he was very suspect of my starting radio. He said, that's a fine hobby, son. That's great. Keep it up. But I don't really think it's a career. But I think through pure stubbornness more than anything else, I made it a career. But I didn't set out to do that. I wanted to underscore that. And I would say that perhaps is a big difference between me and, I can tell you sincerely, my successor at the radio station, she said, at the TV station, said, I wanted to do this ever since I was a little girl. I looked at the TV and said, I want to do that. I never felt that way at all. I would have been very happy to, I love my job, don't get me wrong, but I was very happy to be an editor. I still think the part of the job that I liked the most was writing the news, rewriting it, and editing it. That, I think, is what I'm best at. I may have had something to do with the successful broadcast, but I was as pleased with what I was able to do behind the scenes as in front of the camera. You may remember the station was the new WI, CHWI. Use Now, we called ourselves. You know yourselves from your work. It's so important that you get your branding right. And one of the things that did us a lot of damage in the early days was we couldn't decide what we were going to call the station. The new WI for Windsor, Use Now. Then the formal call letters then and now are CHWI. All Canadian radio stations, with the exception of Newfoundland, start with C. And WI was short for Windsor. Just like PL was named after Free Press in London, the original owners of that station. Going back, I believe the station signed on in 1993, so they recently marked their 30th anniversary. And forgive me if you will, I still refer to it as we, like I'm part of it, though I'm retired. Bob Belichico and Lori Berg have been there from the start. Michelle Molesky joined a couple of years later. Michelle is still there and is the best reporter. John Lewis followed. John just retired recently. The other three are still there. In my time, we've seen reporters move on to bigger markets. Mike Drolet, who went to Global. Anna Blakos, I believe City TV. Annette Gerner went to Ottawa. Sasha Long, retired now as well. Very young to retire, but she married well. She married a fellow who owns a Mercedes-Benz dealership. She's able to live the life of leisure, but she's a lovely person. Sija Liu, you may remember. Watch for her. Sija's on the move. I was proud to say that she was the last person I worked closely with, and I was able to rub some of the magic dust, if you will. She left us, went to Kitchener, and now she's with City TV, or she's with the news channel, CTV News Channel in Toronto. She, like a lot of the young people, first of all, wherever they came from, they want to seem to be in Toronto. And so I was the anti-Toronto guy. Maybe if I was in my 20s or 30s, that would have appealed to me. That call never came from me. I'm not in the Toronto universe. I'm more in the Detroit universe, as many of us are. Wouldn't go to Toronto now if you paid me, but it possessed some appeal. But all the young people want to be there. If they don't want to be there, they want to be in New York City, or they want to be in the United States. Sija definitely wants to be in the US. I'm proudest of my association with Priya Mann, who you'll see on WDIB in Detroit Channel 4. Proud to say I assisted Priya in landing that job. The talent is hers, but I was able to put in a good word for her. And boy, that was even after all the time I was in the business, that was an education. Priya had been with us, very hard worker and a delightful person, and then she went to Kitchener for a while, and I got a call from her. It happened, I was on vacation one day, and Priya got in touch with me. She said, "Where are you?" I said, "I'm in Windsor, I'm on vacation." She said, "Can you write a letter of recommendation for me for WDIB?" And I said, "Sure, when do you want it?" She said, "In the next hour." And she said, "They want it on company letterhead." And I said, I can't do that. I'm not at work. And it so happened, under the former owners of the station, they used to leave the letterhead just lying around. And sometimes that could lead, somebody would send off a letter and say, "I had a muffler repair in my car and I'm not very happy with it. And they fix it for free," this kind of thing. I was always very careful about that. That could be a firing offense today. But my boss, Dan Appleby, would not let us have access to stationery. So I said to Priya, the best I can do is to write a letter on my iPhone, which will have a CTV logo on my sign-on. She said, "Well, I guess that'll have to do." And I said, "Anything else?" She said, "Could you get it over to Detroit before noon?" So I actually drove over with the letter. And I learned at that time, an outfit like they have in-house legal counsel. We're so provincial in some respects in Canada in a very nice way. The US is 10 times our size. And those stations have everything. They've got 7 helicopters and live trucks and all that. We got nothing. We don't even have a live truck anymore. We used to have one. People say, "Can you send your live truck to our event?" We don't have a live truck. We'll send somebody with a little box that will transmit your thing. But anyway, so I took this over to Priya, parked in front of the station, and it's like an armed camp over there, even the local station. I had to be buzzed in and was kind of standing, and I had to be vetted and everything. I said, "I'm just here to drop off a letter." And I was being given the 3rd degree. I said, "Look, I don't have to be here. This is by request." But that was the letter that sealed the deal for Priya Mann. I had to emphasize that she was a member of the visible minority. As you might expect, in a crowded market like broadcasting, you have to say, what does this person possess that nobody else possesses? Otherwise, why are we not hiring an American for this job? Priya was, her presentation spoke for itself. She's a delightful person, though. I find it interesting. I'm still following her career. She's on the morning weekend newscast, and it's often very light and fluffy, which she's very good at, but she was trained to be a serious news reporter. But you do whatever you are asked to do, of course. Our viewers have always been tremendously loyal, and the station would not be around today, I'm convinced, were it not for the way the community rallied around us. It was a Saturday early in 2009. We had been told the station was closing. And the meanest cut of all was somebody in our management team flippantly said, we'll sell the station for $1. And nobody was willing to pay that. There was interest from the Shaw family. Some executives from the Shaw flew in one morning. They were in and gone before I got to work. Had I known, I most certainly would have been there. They just wanted to come in and survey the operation, but our operation was not a standalone operation. Technically, we were hubbed out of London, and the station still is. So even though the news is of Windsor, independent, the technical capacity to put it on the air flows from the Bell Building on Goyo through London. And if London went dark, we would not be able to do our broadcast, and that is still a fact. So when Shaw realized that we were for sale, but London wasn't for sale, they would have had to spend millions getting not just a transmitter at that, but all the necessary infrastructure, control rooms and stuff like that. Anyway, we had a tremendous support, trade unions well represented, moms and pops, some viewers turned out with infants and dogs. I remember that very clearly. Funny thing, Ken Lowenza, no less, noted union leader, bumped into Ken a few years ago, and he was recalling that day, and he said, I never knew you had it in you. What had happened was I had come down with a sore throat the day before this big rally, which was in January. I was really husky. And I took the Friday off because I knew I was going to have to speak on Saturday as the anchor. We were outside on the railing, Pat was there, downtown at University and all that, all bundled up. And I had to really bark it out because my throat was sore. Anyway, I guess I gave it that real old union thing. And Ken said later, I didn't know you were such a firebrand. Well, I'm not, but I was just trying to be heard. I had a megaphone and all that kind of stuff. But that somehow resonated in the halls of Parliament, and Brian Massey did an awful lot to save us. I owe Brian a great deal. I told him that. He raised the case for Windsor News in Parliament, and the Toronto Star picked up the article. It was called "The Death of Small Town Broadcasting," and the station was going to go dark. We never did. We were given a 6-month working notice, which was very good of the company. Very few people left in that time. Christy Bazaire was one of them. Christy went to work for the cancer clinic, but then came back when the station was saved. Jill Brado was our assignment editor. She went to the city of Windsor, where she is still. But we lost very few of our staff. We were all kind of on a death watch, but we were still being paid during that time. I don't think many of us had even gone around to apply for other jobs. We were just kind of hoping against hope the station would stay open, and it did. I don't want to talk too much longer here because I know I'd like to leave some time for questions. Favorite memory, an interview I had with Windsor senior statesman Herb Gray on the occasion of his retirement from Parliament. What a gentleman. Prime Minister Crichton had named Mr. Gray to lead up the International Joint Commission overseeing water quality on the Great Lakes, which was a very prestigious position. I don't know if you remember the politics of the day. It was suggested that Mr. Gray was the only one who had potentially more tenure on Parliament than John Crichton. And the rumor, anyway, of the day was Prime Minister Crichton wanted him out of the way so that he could go on record as the longest-serving member of Parliament, 40 years or something like that. So in his 39th year, they were sending Herb Gray back to Windsor to be head of the International Joint Commission. So naturally, that was one of the questions I asked him diplomatically. Sir, did you feel that you were kind of shuffled out of it? He would not hear it. Absolutely not. The Prime Minister has been wonderful to me. This International Joint Commission is a signature achievement for me. It means I can come home. There's nothing more important than water quality on the Great Lakes. I'm pleased to have this position. He was just tip-top all the way. He asked me one question in the early going. I thought, here we go. He said, we've been talking for about 5 minutes. We're sitting in front of a crackling wood fire at Willestead Manor. And Dave Reno, who sadly has passed away, he was our cameraman, but he set this up very nicely. What's nicer than an interview at Christmas time in front of a crackling wood fire? And Mr. Gray said to me, by the way, how long is this interview going to be? And I thought, oh, here we go. He's ready to wind it up. He said, no. He said, that's not what I mean at all. He said, I just want to know whether you want a long answer or a short answer to your question. He was such a pro. He'd give you a 30-second clip if that's what you wanted. But if you wanted to talk for 5 or 10 minutes, he was happy to do that too. I'd say the most painful story to report was the murder of Windsor Police Senior Constable John Atkinson. We were able to arrange special coverage of the funeral, which the station rarely did. They were reluctant to break away because we were hubbed with London and Wingham. The only parts of the broadcast day that were different were the respective newscasts in each of those markets, but the rest of the stuff, whether it was Littlest Hobo or whatever we were showing, Big Bang Theory, was going to all stations at the same time. We'd only do a local newscast. So when we covered the funeral of John Atkinson, it meant breaking away from regular programming, which was the right thing to do, but it was a pretty big deal for us. I'll always remember Glenn Stannard, police chief, and formerly with the Essex-Kent Scottish Regiment, how he guided Shelley Atkinson through that difficult year. He was with the family for everything. Then he took his leave. Fun stuff. Of all the stories you cover, it's sometimes the fluff and the silly stuff like the water skiing squirrel. That's the story that everybody remembers. You can do award-winning journalism, but people, hey, did you see that water skiing squirrel? Which I like too. I'm a car guy, as Carlo knows, and one of the stories I really liked, Rick Walker, who used to work for us, talked about refurbishing old Crown Victoria police cruisers in Chatham to get more life out of them. And car stories were close to me. I hope I didn't lay it on too thick, but people would often say, you know, if there's a car thing happening, you're going to talk about it. And I thought, that's good for the car guys. I hope I'm not driving their wives crazy. The story of Mason Baker Macri, who was very young when he passed, but his parents are wonderful. They're still in the news often. This young lad who charity in his name was formed. I treasure my own involvement with We Care for Kids, getting to know Kevin O'Neill, Pam Sini, and Leah Hansen. Of Windsor, I would say, and I'll borrow a line from, I believe it was, forgive me, Fasco or Stelco in Hamilton. Their saying was, our product is steel, strength is people. I thought, what a great line. Our strength. That's true of Windsor. Our great strength is people. And I know the difference. I've worked in 7 different markets, doing 8 different jobs. Always considered myself reasonably successful at what I did, but nowhere was I received as well as here. Nowhere did it mean more to me than here because of the great people who live here. Just a couple of quick anecdotes. People that I met, one of my favorites was William Shatner, Montreal, Canada's own Montreal-born William Shatner, Captain Kirk on Star Trek. My late brother Ian was a big fan of Trek. I wasn't so much. My brother had much more of a scientific mind than I did. Tragically, he died at 26 of a coronary, and that alerted me to the fact that we had that weakness in our family. And I had a heart intervention with Pat's guidance in 2012, and that's why I'm standing here today. But I took my brother. It was a Saturday morning in 1975. William Shatner, who was the parade marshal of the St. Catharines Raven Wine Festival, had come to town. And I kept this a secret from my brother. Neither one of us was early risers. And I said, come with me Saturday morning. I won't tell you where we're going, but it involves our breakfast. Just get dressed. We're going to go to St. Catharines. In a room not unlike this, open the door, and here's William Shatner sitting there. Eyes just about, it was a coffee and croissant kind of breakfast thing. Eyes just about dropped out of my brother's head. So, and there was not many journalists there. There was somebody from the newspaper, another radio station. So we naturally saw Shatner and we wanted to talk about Star Trek. And there was the ever-present public relations person. And at the time, Shatner was also doing commercials for Loblaws and Promise Margarine. So we're asking about Star Trek, and it was incidentally, it was out of syndication at that point, but it was not back on TV like it is now. I mean, you can turn on Star Trek anytime and find it. You could not then. It was gone. It was off the air. It was gone. There was no VCRs, no movies to watch at home. Remember that? I mean, that was around 1980. We didn't have VCRs. Anyway, this PR person starts saying, ask him about Loblaws. Ask him about Loblaws. Ask Shatner. He's got William Shatner here, and I'm supposed to ask him about Loblaws. Shatner said, gentlemen, please, perhaps a word or two about Loblaws. Then we can get back to Star Trek. Any questions? Any questions for Jim?
Ed? Yeah, I'll have a question. I come up so that our Zoomers can hear the question.
Oh, sure.
By the way,
Sure.
My wife says we look. What do you think?
I never sure like that.
In this day and age where, there's so much distrust of the news media, and it's not everybody, but what is your feeling about that? And how does the news media regain the trust of the public?
Well, and I'll say this, and I don't want to be overly political about this, but President Trump won the election last week, and the news media generally isn't very happy with it. And every night you turn it on, they're still on his case. They're unhappy with all the. And again, it's not for me to judge these things. And we're not American. I didn't vote in the election any more than perhaps anybody here did. But I would remind these people that he was elected by the majority of the people in the United States, and so you risk alienating at least half your listeners. And TV ratings are going down, and I would submit that journalists are at least partially responsible for that. Now, they're doing the bidding of their masters in many cases. But any one of us in any line of business, you want to be as successful as possible. Not everybody's going to love you. I looked at my work. Not everybody's going to love me, but you hope about 80% or 85% of people might say, he's okay. I like him. I'll watch him. You don't want to dilute your brand. You don't want to take that down to 50%. Look at the late night talk shows. Everybody talked about how, Jay Leno's kind of corny and all that, but Jay Leno had killer ratings. And then you have Jimmy Fallon, who's a very nice guy, but the ratings are less than half what they were. Jimmy Kimmel, his ratings are under 1 million viewers a night when Johnny Carson used to have 12 million or something like that. How is that better? That's because viewers don't want to turn on and be told that their ideas are not valuable or that so-and-so's a schmuck, and you say, well, I just voted for him. So I think that I'm glad, let me put it this way, I'm glad I'm out of the business now because of this. Obviously, I had to do what I was told to do, though I was lucky in my time, never overtly was I given instructions to push or promote anything. But in this time, which is not kind or gentler, toward the very end, and this is when I could see the writing on the wall, people would say things, well, you're only saying that because Trudeau told you to say that. Trudeau's giving you money to say that. That's not the case. That's not the case, but there are people who believe that. And I don't think that, and I'm not saying anything original here, the COVID that we came through, I don't think it's made people any nicer. Every one of us in every way, whether this morning or before the day's out, will have an incident of road rage. Somebody will be behind us in a big Dodge Ram truck running us off the road, or somebody in a minivan, they're in a hurry, and as Pat noted, it happened to us this morning. I put that in my notes. This morning, somebody cut in front of us and we met them at the next traffic light. But they were angry with us for, what is that all about? We've got to, I don't want to be Pollyanna about this, but we've got to go a little bit easier. We're not going to make it. Yeah.
Lighten up.
Yeah, we've got to lighten up. And I'm a serious guy too, but anything else?
Questions for Jim?
We have to